All right, we're going to start in Proverbs 13:12. This is our topic today. The idea is found in Proverbs 13:12. This is just the general idea. I'll be going into different areas or different items from this idea. It says in Proverbs 13:12, "Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life." So basically the idea that hope deferred maketh our hearts sick. And you know what? This is very true. I think we all know what it's like to be disappointed. I think we all know what it's like when we don't get something that we were expecting. And it's good to have expectations, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is having godly expectations. And what exactly do we expect? We need to have expectations. I think that one thing that's lacking in our world is nobody's really expected to do anything, and nobody has any expectations, because if they did, then that would change their decisions on what they're doing. You want to ask them, these dumb people who make really dumb decisions, what were you expecting was going to happen? Well, I don't know. It's obvious what the outcome was going to be, but because they didn't have any expectations about what was going to happen, they make dumb decisions. They eat Tide Pods, and their esophaguses get dissolved and all that good stuff. But they don't have... It's on. They don't have any it's all the way on. They don't have any expectations on anything. So they make weird, dumb decisions. I always remember standing in line behind probably two lesbians at Walmart. But they have this armload of stuff getting ready to go through the checkout. And one says to the other one, "If we buy this, we won't have any money for rent at the end of the month." She goes, "Well, we never have any money anyway." She said, "You're right." Just like, what are you going to expect at the end of the month? So people don't have really any expectations, but yet we do in different areas. And so we need to have expectations, but sometimes we have too high of expectations. We set a standard that is unrealistic. And when we don't get those expectations, hope deferred maketh the heart sick. And so we don't want to have no expectations, but we don't want to have too high of expectations that are unrealistic, where things won't happen, where it's probably not going to come to fruition, and therefore when it doesn't happen, we're disappointed. And we're going to go to the book of Matthew 22:42, and I better think of a synonym for expectation, or else you're going to get really sick of hearing the word expectation today. So, our first one is, what is our expectation about Jesus? Probably going to start at the biggest ones and work my way down, or start at the biggest, go down, and then come back up. I'm not sure. But here's the biggest one. Our expectation, our premeditated thought about Jesus. And the Jews had this problem. And it negatively impacted his ministry. It says in Matthew 22:42, saying, "What think ye of Christ? Whose son is he?" And they say unto him, "The son of David." This is what their idea of who Christ was going to be is. They wanted a king. They wanted a deliverer. They wanted a ruler. And you know what? Jesus is a king. Jesus is a ruler. Jesus is a deliverer. But he was not going to be that at this time. We know he's going to be a ruler. And he is a ruler in heaven. But as far as being a ruler of the earth, it was not his time for that. It was time for him to be a savior. But since he wasn't going to be their king, they were going to, after I think the feeding of the 5,000, they were going to force him to be a king. He knew that they were going to take him by force. They wanted some sort of revolution. They wanted some sort of deliverer. And their idea of Christ was going to be he's a son of David, because that would be the kingly line. when really they should have been looking for a deliverer from sin, not a deliverer from Rome. And so when Jesus didn't live up to what they expected the Christ was going to be, they didn't want him anymore. And that is what people do so much with God is, oh, what? God can take away problems. God can fix the ABC. God can do miracles. Well, guess I need a miracle, so I guess I'm going to go to God. And you know what? Although God is a God of miracles, and although God can work miracles, and although God is our Heavenly Father, He doesn't exactly have to do that. And I think a problem we got is that we have an American view of God when we don't have an American God. Right. And the Jews had a Jewish view of God when they didn't have a Jewish God. What I'm saying is, God is God. And He doesn't have to live up to the expectations of cultures or nations. Right. And everybody's going to have a different view depending on what area they grow up, depending on what area they are indoctrinated in and live in. And I read articles, and when you read just different stuff published, it's not incorrect. They're not making up stuff. It's 100% true, except what they're leaving out is dangerous, because they don't go into that God is a God of, He is a holy God, He is a just God, He is a consuming fire, and they portray God. The common view is of Jesus like holding a sheep kind of image. And although He does that, it's not true. It's not like, nope, Jesus isn't a God of love. He is, but there is a just part of God. And so although He is a ruler, and although He is going to watch out for Israel and all that, He was not there for that time. And so I think a problem is since we have this American view of God, people read through the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and they go, oh, what? Children were killed. Well, I don't want that God if children were killed. Elisha with the bears and stuff like that. They read through the laws and stuff. Oh, some of those laws are weird. What's this death? Well, God would never kill anybody. God would never... And although it's different with the age of grace, I understand. I'm not saying that He's going to kill anybody. But I'm saying that the idea of, oh, God would never send anybody to hell. Well, why? I mean, we think that is like against the rules. In American culture, as nowadays American culture, that would be against the rules. Nobody wants the death penalty. They want the death penalty for the unborn, but for the murderers and rapists, they want them to just walk free. It's ridiculous. But they don't want the death penalty for anybody, and therefore it would seem unjust that God would send somebody to hell. In American culture. In China, I don't know, you probably get the death penalty for not paying your taxes or something. So it's not, it's just a culture thing, what I'm saying. And so, since they had a Jewish view of God, because the Jews were very patriotic, and I think most people are very patriotic, but especially the Jews, because they pictured themselves as the people of God. So when Jesus wasn't exactly extremely patriotic, when He ate with the tax collectors who were traitors, when He helped Roman people, when He helped the Gentiles, they're like, well, this isn't our extremely patriotic Christ, because although He had come to Israel at that time, He still helped non-Jewish people. And so they really didn't care for that too much. And so when He's helping lame people and all that, and He's not helping the upper class, which was their culture, since He was against their culture, they were not happy. And so He did not live up to their expectations. Now we'll go to John chapter 4 and verse 25. We see somebody else's view of Christ, which is much closer to a proper view. It's a little bit off, but it's still much closer than what the Jews had. Of course, we're in John 4, what big story is found in John 4? A woman at the well. So this is this story here, and in John 4:25 it says, "The woman saith unto Him, I know that when Messiah cometh, which is called Christ, when He is come, He will tell us all things." Now, although Christ was a teacher, we know that Jesus says that when the Holy Spirit has come, he will teach us all things. So Jesus didn't exactly teach everybody all things, although he did try to teach a ton of things. It's not exactly 100% correct, but it is very close, very close. And so since she had this more biblical view of Christ, we see what she did. When he tells her all things she did, then she's like, yep, that's the Christ. It's not when he set up his empire and drove out Rome and put his foot down and made Israel great again. That's not when she believed him, because he never did that. But when he told her all things, and she's like, yes, this is the Christ, she gets saved, she becomes instant missionary, leads many people to Christ. Many people get saved because she had a more biblical view of Christ. So the view that we have of Christ is going to determine how much we work. It's going to determine how much we trust the Lord. It's going to depend how much we get accomplished. It determines everything. Another area that we need to have godly expectations in is how God works. If you go to 2 Kings chapter 5 and verse 11. Because hope deferred maketh the heart sick. If Christ doesn't live up to our expectations, we will become discouraged. And sometimes that discouragement is unnecessary because God didn't wrong us. Right. It's just he didn't do what we thought he should do. 2 Kings 5:11. It says here, but Naaman was wroth and went away and said, behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Apparently they had faith healers in their day too. But he thought he was going to go to some faith healer. And he probably thought he was going to get the same results. But since God's command was that he go to the Jordan and dip himself 7 times, was it? He was disappointed because he thought Elisha's going to come out, call on the name of the Lord. The sky would get dark. He'd strike over the place, and the power of God would come through Elijah and onto him, and shazam, he'd be healed. But that's not how God wanted to work. He wanted him to go dip himself in the Jordan 7 times, and that's what worked. And so we get this idea of, hey, I got a problem, and how I want God to do it, how I want God to fix it, is I want him to walk through here and come over, and I want him to do this. And you know what? God does answer our prayers, and the problem is fixed, but he doesn't do it how we thought he was going to do it. And then we get discouraged. Even though our prayers were answered, he didn't do it how we thought he was going to do it. And this is a big problem, because we read the scriptures and we read about great things that God did, and we read about people getting saved, and we go, wow, that would sure be nice if people get saved. And then people get saved and we go, well, how genuine were they? I don't think they were very genuine. No, that's not God working. That's just no, that definitely wasn't God working. But I wish people get saved, and then somebody else gets saved. No, I don't think they were genuine. Well, how do you know if somebody's genuine? You really don't. And that's really not up for us to decide. And so sometimes we read through the scriptures and we say, oh, I wish God would do that same thing today. And when he does it, but it's not exactly how we imagine he'd do it, we say, oh, no, God's not working. We read through the scriptures, and the Bible is composed in such a way that it highlights people's life. It doesn't show us exactly the day-to-day struggles of humanity that they too had. And so then when we have to go through those day-to-day struggles, we think that every day should be like what Peter had, or every day something great was happening. Well, every day something great wasn't happening in Peter's life. His whole life is composed into 2 books. I mean, the Gospel and Acts, and a little bit of Peter, the books of Peter. Paul's life is composed really into the book of Acts, with his epistles too. And so it wasn't like that all the time. And what I'm saying is we expect God's going to work like he did with Peter and Paul and John and James and those people. And when he doesn't, we get discouraged. And although over our lifetime things get accomplished, then you have to look at the big picture of what have you accomplished over your lifetime, because every week and every month isn't going to be something wonderful. And so we get discouraged when God doesn't work like we think he should. And the truth is, God doesn't have to work like we think he should. God doesn't have to answer our prayers the way we think he has to answer them. And it's dangerous to put qualifiers on prayers. Because when we start nitpicking and we start saying, God, this is exactly how I think you should do it, sometimes God does do it exactly how we ask him to, and then we realize the grave decision we made. Sometimes when we pray too specifically like that, we don't exactly get the answer we need, although we got the answer that we wanted. If Naaman wanted Elijah to come out and do this whole production and show, Naaman probably would have got the same results he came in with. And sometimes when we want God to do this marvelous thing and this just unrealistic thing, sometimes he will do kind of what we ask him to, but we don't get the result that we really need. Although we got Elijah coming out and striking his hand over and all this nonsense. Our next one is in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. We need to have the godly expectation for his blessings or the fruit of our labor. I don't know exactly how to qualify this one. 1 Corinthians 2:9. Says here in did I say 1 Corinthians? 1 Corinthians 2:9. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. So as far as our expectation for the fruit of our labor, for the fruit of heaven, we don't have a just expectation for that. I mean, think, it hath not even entered into the heart of man what God hath prepared for them that love him. That's kind of unimaginable, I guess, because if it hasn't even entered into anybody's heart what God hath prepared for them that love him, beyond what's that verse? And I can't think of how the verse goes. But anyway, it is above human imagination. It is above human expectation, the things that God can do. I mean, it's specifically talking about heaven. It's specifically talking about the things that God has prepared, but in heaven. But I'm saying here on earth, God can do things above what we imagine. How that verse, I know there's a verse out there, I just can't think about how it goes. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. So if God is able to do above not only what we ask, but what we think he can do. Sometimes we undermine God. Sometimes we don't give God what he is due. Sometimes we think he's only capable of doing ABC when he's able to do more letters that are in the alphabet. And we think that is why we don't pray. That is why we don't ask him for things, is because we think, oh, God only is reserved for these great tasks and he's not concerned about this, when really he wants all our tasks. So when we have a low expectation about God, we are not going to treat him with the respect that he's due. And therefore we will get discouraged because we are not asking him to do what he's capable of. We are not treating him with the respect that he deserves. And so if God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think, if God has prepared things for us that we cannot, that nobody has ever imagined, it would be no small thing to think that God can do things with your life, God can do things with your ministry that you don't even expect. God can do amazing things beyond your imagination. But when we restrict him, when we put him on a leash, and when we reserve him for special tasks, and when we treat him like he's some false god that only answers our prayers if we go and we burn little incense and say little chants, and hopefully somehow we do the right things at the right time, and if we do that, maybe it'll have a little effect. And we treat him like a false god of the Old Testament. We treat him like a false god of the pagans. We what I'm talking about, where they build little shrines and they treat it like something special. We have an unimaginable, unstoppable force. I don't want to call him a force exactly, a power. It's kind of disrespectful, but the force that he has, the power that he has, is unimaginable. But yet we only use it for special occasions. And I'm not saying, of course, we understand we have to be respectful to him. Of course, we understand that Solomon said, "Let your words be few when you speak to God." I'm not saying that we should misuse what God has given us. But I'm saying most people don't treat God, most people don't use God like they should. And I'm not saying to use God either. I'm not saying, use God. I'm saying use God for his work, use God to accomplish what he has given us. And so as far as the fruit, this is the fruit of our labor. This is not exactly the fruit of our labor. The fruit of our labor is our rewards in heaven. The fruit of our labor is seeing Christ. And as the song goes, I don't want to mess up the song. I can't remember how it goes. But, I can't remember. But anyway, we truly don't realize the reward that God has given us. We truly do not realize all God has provided us with and the blessings he has given us with. And let me remind you how unthankfulness precedes all the awful sins in Romans chapter 1. And we become unthankful because we don't realize the fruit of our labor, and we don't realize that there even is fruit. Our next spot we'll go to is in Genesis 10:11. We underestimate God, and then we usually overestimate our worries. Genesis 20:11. Genesis 20:11. It says, "And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake." We all understand Abraham's big mistake, but he was forced to do it by his worries. He made himself to do it because he overestimated his problems. So the danger is underestimating God, and then on the other end of the pendulum, we overestimate our worries. We think we're faced with the situation, we see things, and immediately we usually think of the absolute worst outcome, and we major on that. And we think, they're going to kill me. They're going to take my family. If I don't do something about it, the world's going to end. And so it's going to be horrible and everything. When really there's nothing to worry about. God could have taken care of this problem for him. And the only reason what he was worried about happened was because the decision he made because he was worried. They did take his wife because he did something that would let him take her. And usually when we're worried and when we're scared, we make decisions that cause the thing we're worried or scared about to happen. And we go, well, yeah, that's what I thought would happen. No, if you had only done what God asked you to do, it probably wouldn't have happened. But we get scared and we make dumb decisions. What I'm talking about is with fear, if we don't expect that God can catch us, we're not going to jump. And God's telling us to jump. God's telling us to do something, but when we go, no, you can't catch me. I'm scared of falling, so I'm going, and we make dumb decisions. We jump off the other side where God is not, and we hurt ourselves. See, you weren't going to catch me. Well, no, if you had jumped when God told you to and where He told you to, He would have caught you. When we go, no, and we back up and fall off the other side and go, see, God didn't catch me. And it's our own fault for bringing it upon ourselves. But then we associate that with God. Because since the two kind of happen at the same time, we go, yeah, it was definitely God's fault. No, it was our fault because we didn't do what God asked Him to do because we overestimated our worries. With people, especially with pistols, when you shoot them, you just got to shoot it. You can't anticipate the pain, or else you're not going to hit your target. And you see people, and the dirt's flying and everything, and nothing's coming close to the target because it's always like, and they wince and point it down. Well, maybe not that much. Well, some people, yeah, that much. But because they overestimate their worry, and that, what's there to really be scared about? It's not like it blows up in your hand or something. And so because we're worried, we make dumb decisions. I don't know if I should tell anybody this in case I ever go fishing with them and they get a hook stuck in themselves. But if anybody ever gets a hook stuck in themselves, or if anybody ever has to pull a hook out, I should say, what you do is you say, I'm going to pull it out on 5. And then you go 1, 2, and you pull it out. Because they're expecting it to happen on 5. And so you never pull it out when you tell them to, because when they're expecting it, they tighten up and they get scared because they overestimate the pain. Although it may be painful, but they overestimate what's going to happen, and since they're scared, they make dumb decisions. And so what I'm saying is that we cannot overestimate our worries, because when we do that, we don't listen to the Lord. We don't jump when He tells us to, and we mess up the situation farther than if we would have just let God handle it. We make a mountain out of a molehill when we look at it through the eyes of worry. And when we do that, we don't realize that our estimation, that our expectation of worry is much higher than we think. Think about all the news has told you is going to happen in the past 2 or so years. And how much of that has happened? I really can't think of anything. They were expecting global nuclear warfare. They were expecting that we'd be learning differently. Just crazy stuff. And none of it really happened. And when I think about it, we see situations on TV. And the problem with seeing it on TV is they don't show you before, they don't show you after. They just show you what they want you to see. And that's all you see. But they want you to worry, they want you to be afraid, and they overestimate, and they want you to have the absolute worst expectation of what's going to happen, because when people are scared, and when people are worried, they will do dumb things. And they know that, and so if they can get people scared, and if they can get people worried, they will do dumb things. And that's why we cannot overestimate our worries. Again, as the Bible says, I will not fear what man can do unto me. Can't remember, I think it's in Psalm somewhere, but I will not fear what man can do unto me. And when we think about what are we worried about, we realize that this whole time we have just been overestimating our fears. We have just been overestimating our worries. And there really was nothing to be afraid about, but since we were afraid, then there was something to be afraid about. The greatest fear that we should have is being afraid of something that needs not to be feared. If we go to Philippians chapter 1 and verse 20, another expectation that we need to have is we need to have a godly expectation of ourselves. This is my favorite verse, and I don't know if Connie still has it memorized from when she had to spell out every letter for my graduation. It's kind of a long verse, especially when you look at the verses above it and below it. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. Philippians 1:20. Philippians 1:20. So we need to have a godly expectation of ourselves. And it says here in Philippians 1:20, according to my earnest expectation and my hope, that in nothing I should be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ should be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. So according to my earnest expectation, what is he expecting? That in nothing I should be ashamed. What do we expect out of ourselves? What do we expect ourselves to do? And I start off by saying that in our world today, not many people expect very much from themselves. Well, as far as our expectation in heaven, what do we expect to get? What do we expect that we are going to accomplish? And the Bible says, let no man think himself to be greater than he is. I know that's not what the verse says. I know it's in the New Testament somewhere. But let no man think of himself more than he ought to, or so. To the other side, we shouldn't think of ourselves lower than we ought to either. We should just think of ourselves how we should think of ourselves. And so our expectation, our hope, that in nothing we should be ashamed. And that is really all we should be concerned about, is living in such a way that we are not ashamed in heaven. People expect that they major on there's mansions in heaven. They major on there's a street of gold. And they major on all these great aspects. But the greatest aspect, the greatest area of heaven is getting there and not being ashamed when we get there. Because that should be our goal, is to live in such a way that we are not ashamed at his coming, that we are not ashamed at the judgment, because there is a judgment. We have to give an account of the things that we've done in our body. We have to give an account of ourselves. We are made stewards of God, and a steward must be accounted faithful. And so there is an accounting, and I think of, I don't want to mess up the song for anybody who likes it. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see, when I look upon his face. No, when he takes us by the hand and leads us through the promised land. Well, that day does come, but not for like 1,000 and so years, because when we get there, it's not exactly going to be a what a day it will be. It's not exactly a day to be looked forward to. Although, yes, we will see Christ. Well, so did John. And he fell down as though he was dead. He wasn't exactly extremely happy to see him, because when we see him in his glory, there's some respect. So what I'm saying is we have to have a seriousness that, yes, although we can look forward to heaven, although there's going to be a day that will be, and although there will be the promised land, we have to, it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. There's going to be a judgment after we die. And so our expectation should be that in nothing I will be ashamed. That has to be our determination. That when I get to heaven, I will not be ashamed of the things that I have done. I will not be ashamed of the things I have not done, because there should be no room for being ashamed in heaven. And in every temptation, God has given us a way to escape. In every area, God has given us a way that we can prosper and that we can be a blessing to people, and in a way that we can be amazing for his cause. And he has given that to us, and depending on how you treat it and depending on what you do, you may be ashamed. You may be ashamed of your lack of service. You may be ashamed at your indulgence in sin. But there doesn't have to be that, because our expectation should be that I will not be ashamed. People expect things from us. People expect us to do certain things. And if it's good things, great, you may be able to fulfill some of those. You do not have to live up to people's expectation of you. You have to live up to what God expects from you. And you have to have an expectation of yourself, because if you have no expectation of yourself, if you're not if you don't hold yourself accountable for what you do, you'll just live in a way that where you do whatever you want to do. And that is not a godly way to live. Kind of similar to this, but Luke chapter 12 and verse 40. We'll head over there. Luke 12:40. May have gotten ahead of myself with what I said. The last one. But Luke 12:40. We have to have an expectation of ourselves, but another thing we have to be expecting is His return. Luke 12:40. It says, "Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when ye think not." So, if He's going to come in an hour that we think not, what good is it expecting Him to come? But anyway, we have to expect His return, because that should be our greatest motivator to do what is right. That should be our greatest motivator to avoid what is wrong. Because if we are expecting that God's going to come when we least expect it, then we would live in a different way. Because He could come at any moment, and sometimes I know that, but sometimes it becomes more real to me. You know what I mean? And sometimes you can just feel like, yeah, He could come right now, and then other times, you know in the back of your head that He could come, but it's not exactly completely real to you. Maybe it's different for you. I'm just saying how it is for me. And sometimes, but when it becomes real, there's an excitement, there's that something could happen to you that every Christian through history has been waiting for. And you could make history by being the generation, one of the people who gets raptured. But the interesting part is that He is going to come in an hour when we think not. Why in the world would we not expect Him to come? Which makes me wonder, is something going to happen that would cause us to expect that He wouldn't come? Is it that things will be so good that we think, oh, Christ wouldn't come in the good times? Or will we become so discouraged and mad at God that we think that He's not going to come back anymore? It just makes me wonder, why would we think that He's not going to come back? But He's going to come when we don't expect it, and that's why we have to be living in such a way that we're always ready. He likens it to a thief in the night. Well, although we do not know if or when a thief will break in, some people live ready for if a thief breaks in. Other people are not prepared, but other people are prepared at all times. And although there may be times when you heighten your security, such as when suspicious vehicles turn around in your driveway and just weird stuff, but there's, you know what I mean, when you're always ready, you sleep with something on your nightstand just in case somebody does break in. So what I'm saying is, although He likens it to a thief in the night, and although we don't know when that's going to happen, we do live in a way that we are prepared for a thief at any time. And in that same way, although we do not know when Christ is going to come, and although He's going to come when we least expect it, we should at least expect it in a little bit. Even though the Bible says that we don't expect it to happen, it is going to happen. It also makes me think He is talking, I know it's for us, I know that. But He is also talking to the apostles who, when you read through, since I'm on the subject of expectations, when you read through the Old Testament and when you read through the New Testament, they were expecting Him to return in their generation. Really, especially in the Old Testament, you have the times of Christ and then you have the tribulation. Our area, our 2,000 years or so, not quite 2,000 years, but about that, was totally unexpected. But if you read through the Old Testament, and I'm not saying that they were wrong. I'm just saying from their point of view and from what they knew, our day and age really wasn't that much expected. I don't think they were expecting the world that Christ wouldn't return for another 2,000 years. And so I'm just saying sometimes unexpected things happen that we don't imagine. Sometimes we have a certain point of view and we can't see what is being obscured. I know people have likened it to that looking from mountain point to mountain point, you don't see the valley in the middle, and that's a great illustration. But sometimes from our point of view, it is skewed, not exactly incorrectly. We just don't see the entire picture. And so that is why we have to have the expectation God gives us. Now, finishing up, we'll go to Acts chapter 3 and verse 1. Acts 3:1. So Christ did definitely return in an hour that they thought not, because I think Peter says in 1st or 2nd Peter that our salvation is nearer than when we believed. And although that statement is it's 100% correct, it kind of sounds like he was expecting Christ to return in his lifetime. And you know what? That's exactly what the attitude we need to have. Is although it may seem extreme, I'll say that God may not return for another 200 years. I mean, that does seem like, no, that there's no way that's going to happen. Well, it might happen. I mean, nobody knows the day or the hour. But we should live in such a way that, yes, he could return in this very hour. He could return today. He could return right now. We just don't know. And so we have to expect the unexpected. This is just in conclusion. But what do we expect out of everything, basically? Out of all these things that I stated, from what to expect from Christ, what to expect, how do we expect God to work, what do we expect from God's blessings or the fruit, how do we overestimate our worries, what do we expect from ourselves, how do we expect his return. And just in conclusion, or here in Acts 3:1, it says, Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour, and a certain man lame from his mother's womb was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms of them that entered into the temple. Who, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked an alms. And Peter, fastening his eyes upon him and John, said, Look on us. And he gave heed unto them, expecting to receive something of them. Then Peter said, Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And he took him by the right hand, and lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. And he leaped up, and stood, and walked, and entered with them into the temple, walking and leaping, and praising God. But it's interesting that he gave heed, in verse 5, that he gave heed, expecting to receive something from them. That is both beautiful and sad, because he got what he needed, but he didn't get what he wanted. He wanted an alms. He wanted a little coin. He wanted something that he could eat that day, but what he got was what he really needed. So what do we expect from God? What do we expect from his blessings? How do we expect him to work? And most of the time we look at God and we go, God, please give me an alms. Please give me a coin. Please give me something that I can eat today and get by. And God says, I don't want to give you that. I want to make you walk again. And of course, we realize that we've been saved. Of course, we understand we were blind and now we see. We understand that we were lame, but now we walk. But I'm saying sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we feel beaten down. Sometimes we feel lame again. And sometimes we look at God and we just want something from him. And God just doesn't give us something. He gives us what we need. Wouldn't it be foolish for this lame man to go, oh, but I wanted silver and gold. You made me walk again. I wanted silver and gold. We'd say, how ridiculous. This man got what he really needed, but that is how we treat God a lot. We ask God to do these little things, and God says, I'm not just going to do those little things. I'm going to do something magnificent. We go, well, yeah, but I wanted this little thing done. And it's just sad. I want this is just how I imagine what a lot of people do. I saw this one video where these parents decided they were going to surprise their kids and take them, I can't remember where, on vacation somewhere. I think it was Disneyland. Sorry. But they were going to take them that, and they had told them that they were going to go visit their old house. And so when they surprised them, the two kids are happy, and the one was like, oh, I want to go to wherever. Whatever the town's name was, I can't remember, of course. But he was disappointed that they weren't going to go to his old house. Well, I'm sorry for comparing heaven to Disneyland and God's blessings, but I'm just saying, sometimes God has these huge, magnificent plans for us, and we expect He's going to take us back to see our old hometown, our old house. But, like, why? Why do we get so bogged down with the things of this life? Why do we get so focused on the things of this world? Why do we want God to make our toast and coffee when He wants to give us magnificent, unimaginable blessings? And so I'm saying we need to have the right expectations, because if we don't have the right expectations and God doesn't do what we want Him to do, it makes our heart sick. And I think a great amount of our discouragement today comes from us expecting God to expecting God to do something that is not what He has in His will. Sometimes, such as with soul winning, we may go out, and I've heard people say this. Oh, yeah, the whole time I talked to one person, and they were just talking, and I didn't get out and pass out very many tracts. Well, isn't that the point? Yeah. And they get, what I'm saying is we get discouraged that we go out, that what we want to happen gets accomplished, but we don't accomplish what we exactly expected to happen. Why do we go out soul winning? It's for people to get saved. And so if one person gets saved, it's a success. But we think, oh, I have to pass out so many tracts. And although it's great to pass out so many tracts, if you get one person saved, that's the best thing that can happen. And so when I'm just trying to boil it down to our expectations may not be what God wants for us. And when God decides to do something greater, or if God does not do what we exactly want Him to do, it makes our hearts sick. And so that's why we have to have a view of God from the Bible, not an American view of God. God never promised to give us a house, a car, and a job. God never promised those things, and so when God doesn't do those things, there's no need to get mad at God, and there's no need to get discouraged. God never promised to keep us healthy. God never promised those things, and although He does most of the time, He is not obligated to perform in that area. He has given us promises, and we can expect those from Him, because it is impossible for God to lie. But just remember to have the just and right expectation of God, to have the right idea of God, so that you are not disappointed when something happens that you were not expecting. Be expecting His return, be expecting how He works, and be expecting Elijah to come out and do some magic show to heal you. Just expect that when you come to God, you are going to get healed, but you may not, not exactly, not promising God's going to heal anybody. But when you come to God, know that He does answer prayers, but that He does not have to do it exactly how we were expecting Him to do it. And just love the Lord for who He is and what He does. And let's close. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just pray that we can have the right attitude that we need to have, and that we can expect You to do what You have promised to do. And just pray that we would, or that we would just honor You, that we would love You. And, or just bless the remaining services. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So Scott's going to come and take up the van offering.